Shavua Tov, good morning. This week is the Parsha of Vayishlach. We learn about how Yaakov Avinu, after running away from his home in Beersheva, as he was in danger from his brother Esav, after taking away the blessings from him, from his father Yitzchak, and Esav threatened that he would kill him. So upon the advice of his mother, she suggested that you should go away for a little bit until the anger of your brother will subside, and eventually you'll come back. So Yaakov went away to Haran, and there he spent 20 years. He came there all alone, without a penny, with no family, and through that 20-year sojourn, he became very, very successful, both in terms of his family. He married and had 11 of the 12 Shvatim. As well, he became very, very successful with many, many flocks of cattle, sheep, many, many servants. And now he comes back. He is told by Hashem, it is time to go back to your land and to face up to Esav, to try to reconcile, to try to make up with his brother. And that's where the Parsha Vayishlach opens up, that Yaakov, he's still uncertain as to the temperament of his brother, and therefore he decides, because it's not clear, it could be a very dangerous situation, Vayishlach Yaakov Malachim, he sends not just physical people, he actually sends angels to check out as to whether Esav, what his state of mind is. But they return and they say that your brother, he's still your brother who hates you. And not just that, he is now coming towards you with 400 men. So things are not looking so good. So Yaakov realizes that it is time for a confrontation with his brother, and he prepares himself with 3 modes of attack, with 3 options. Number 1, he is going to prepare a special gift, many, many animals, cattle, as a gesture of goodwill towards his brother. He also is going to resort to davening, to prayer. And finally, he devises a military tactic and strategy to prepare for war. So today we're going to talk about his prayer. We're going to talk about the special tefillah that Yaakov said to save himself, salvation in his current predicament. It says that Yaakov, Vayira Yaakov Ma'od, he became very frightened and fearful. Rashi says because he was afraid he might get killed, or he might need to kill others. And therefore, he divides his family into 2 camps. And then he goes about a very interesting prayer. He says, Katonti mikol chasadim and mikol emes. He says, Hashem, I have become small, little, from all of the kindness that you have bestowed upon me. And therefore, and he says that initially, Kibimakli avarti es hayarden, initially, when I crossed over, I had but my staff with me. Now I have grown to 2 camps. So look how far I've come. Hatzileinina miyad achi miyad Esa. Please, Hashem, save me from my brother Esav. Pen yavai v'ikani emal banim. He might strike me. He might decimate my family. And therefore, please save me. Vata Marta Heitev Eitiv Imach. You said you'll be good to me, you'll be watching me and protecting me. So here you have a prayer that on the part of Yaakov, that Hashem should spare him from any harm on the hands of his brother Esav. And we know how the story goes. Ultimately, when he confronts Esav, things go pretty well, not as bad as he feared, and Esav kisses him. Well, it's debatable as to how sincere it was, but in any event, he is able to reconcile with his brother. They part their own way. They each go on their own ways, and that's the story. So the commentators try to understand the very premise of Yaakov's prayer, because it says Yaakov's all scared. He's nervous. He doesn't know what's going to be. But the question is that Hashem has already promised him. He's given him two assurances, both when Yaakov left Beersheba. In the parasha of Vayetze, we learn about how Hashem tells him that I will be with you wherever you go, I will protect you, and everything will be good for you. You will come back, you will have your family. Hashem already gave him that assurance, and as well, when he was in Haran as well, Hashem gave him that blessing. So he already had Hashem's assurance, he had divine protection. Why was Yaakov fearful as to what will be with his future? Why wasn't he confident that Hashem would be there to protect him? Hashem gave him his word. So Rashi, the foremost commentator on the Torah, he explains that when Yaakov says katonti, I have become small, it is not referring to himself that he has become small, but rather it's referring to his merits. That due to all of the kindness and goodwill that Hashem has bestowed upon him, but he's sort of run through much of his credit, much of the events that happened. Hashem had to save him from Lavan, and when he was at the Yarden, and the fact that he was wrestling with others, there was many stories where Yaakov had to be saved. So ultimately, it was in all of these stories, he was afraid that there were the debits, that he had all these merits, all these credits, and over time, his bank, so to speak, has been depleted. And he mentions another point. He was afraid, Shema nislachlachli bechet, I have become sullied, I've become soiled from the sins, which perhaps we'll address a little bit later why he was afraid he committed any sin. But as the Marsha, the Rabbi Leo Mizrahi, others explain, Rashi presents these two components because the fact that his merits have been diminished, that itself doesn't mean that he would be in danger. Rather, because Hashem already gave him his protection, he promised him. But combined with the fact that perhaps he may have sinned, now Yaakov needs to reassess as to, is he truly protected? Yes, Hashem gave him the promise, but because of various events that have transpired, perhaps that will no longer hold true. In any event, when Yaakov says katonti, that I have become diminished, I have become small, he's referring to his merits. He's referring to the good things that the goodwill that he has accrued over time, over his achievements, that have become diminished. And thus, he is no longer worthy of being spared. And therefore, he prays to Hashem, Hatzileni, please, I need you to help me, I need you to save me. This is the explanation of Rashi. And Nachmanides Ramban, he disagrees with the explanation of Rashi. He says that's not the literal explanation, because the Torah seems to say katonti, that the person himself has become small. I have become small. And the thing is that it's hard to understand why has the verse says that I become small because of the kindness and all the good things, the favors Hashem has bestowed upon me. So Ramban says no. What the pasuk is referring to is that the person has become small. Right? Katonti refers to Yaakov. I have become small. And therefore, mikol hachasadim v'chol ha'emes, I am no longer worthy of the kindness and the goodwill and protection of Hashem. In any case, all of this bears explanation, because the Torah seems to be saying something very different. The Torah seems to be saying, or Yaakov seems to be suggesting, katonti mikol hachasad mikol ha'emes. If we read the verse literally, it seems to suggest or imply that why did Yaakov feel small? As a direct result, because Hashem has been so good and so kind to me, that's why I feel small. I feel diminished. And this needs explanation, because seemingly, if Hashem was so kind to him, imagine you received so much blessing and so much goodness in your life. That should result in a feeling of happiness, of joy, gratitude of Hashem, but why feel small? Why would that result in a feeling of humility, of smallness, of diminution? Seemingly, when something good happens to you, it should have the opposite effect. You should feel excited. You should feel happy, bigger, larger. And ultimately, the question also remains as to why Yaakov, he knew, he was a very honest person. He was very honest with himself. Why would he think that he actually sinned? He truly wasn't worthy of Hashem's kindness. What has he done in those intervening years that would result in the fact he would no longer be worthy of Hashem's assurance? Hashem gave him a blessing. He says, it will be good for you. I'll protect you. I will be there for you. And somehow he feels that assurance, that promise, the word of Hashem would no longer apply. So I'd like to present an explanation that was given by the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneir Zalman of Liadi. And by introduction, this upcoming Shabbos will be the 19th of Kislev, Yud Tes Kislev. And for all of those who know, on the Hasidic and Chabad Hasidic calendar, Yud Tes Kislev is known as the Rosh Hashanah for Hasidus. It is the most vital day. Like the Rosh Hashanah, the beginning, the head of the year, just like the head is the most vital part of the body. It is the life force, the nerve center of everything. So too in the Chabad Hasidic calendar, and the Hasidic calendar, Yud Tes Kislev is the most central and important day of the calendar. Why is that? Because in the year 1798, the Alter Rebbe was arrested for what was at that time, they informed upon him, and he was sent to prison on the account of treason. As at that time, the Alter Rebbe was teaching and disseminating Chassidus. Now the truth is, for generations before that, the Baal Shem Tov and the Mezritcher Magid, who was the teacher of the Alter Rebbe, were also teaching Chassidus. But the Alter Rebbe took it to a whole new level, to a whole new frontier in terms of teaching and disseminating the Chassidus in Eastern Europe at that time, and with more elaboration. And there was a great opposition. There was a big pushback from the Jewish establishment in general, and even in the Hasidic circles, many disagreed with the tactics of the Alter Rebbe, because he wasn't just teaching ideas of Hasidus, but it was also the process, the methodology, whereby the Alter Rebbe contended that the study of Hasidus should be one that we apply the tools, just like when we study any philosophical discipline with critical thinking, so too this should be applied in the realm of Hasidus, whereby the word Chabad, the acronym for Chachma Bina Das, conception, comprehension, and connection, there was a process whereby a person really delves deeply to understand these ideas of Hasidus in order to apply them into the day-to-day living. And there was a pushback which culminated, and there was great intense opposition, very bitter fighting, and ultimately it resulted and culminated in the story of Yud Tes Kislev, whereby they informed upon the Alter Rebbe that he was aiding and abetting the Turks, the Ottoman Empire, which was at war with the Russian government, and ultimately he was accused of trying to rebel against the Tsar and Russia. And he was imprisoned, which was a very serious crime, treason, which could have had a capital punishment. And it was a very serious accusation. The Alter Rebbe spent 53 days in prison. He was brought to what we know as St. Petersburg, and there was this island. It was like a fortress, like on an island over there, where he was jailed for 53 days. He was interrogated about many aspects of Judaism and specifically about Chabad Hasidus. And it was on the 19th of Kislev where he was liberated. And it was a great joy and celebration for what the Alter Rebbe said. It's not just for me. It's something that was really the entire world, even the non-Jews, appreciated the great miracle and the vindication of the Chabad Hasidic movement. And the Alter Rebbe, at that point, he came to realize that this whole story, the whole saga of Yutas Kislev, was not just merely an event. His detractors were trying to get at him, and ultimately, through a whole miraculous process, he was liberated. In fact, he saw there was something deeper, there's something more profound at play. And the reality it was, things that played out here in this physical terrestrial world was really a spiritual eruption that was happening on a deeper plane, on a deeper strata of reality, whereby there was a pushback in opposition to the teaching of Hasidus in the supernal, celestial worlds, whereby until that point, Hasidus was very much limited to a select and elite few. And now, the Alter Rebbe was trying to really change the status quo. He was challenging the establishment, even in the Hasidic circles, where he says the teachings of Hasidus have to be accessible and available to the masses. And even in the Hasidic world, they said, hang on, these are deep, abstruse, delicate, subtle Hasidic ideas. To apply the disciplines of philosophy and intellectualism, they thought it was demeaning and degrading for such holy and spiritual ideas to be taught like you're studying some philosophy. And there was a whole debate in the supernal realms as to whether these activities should continue to be carried out. And in fact, we know that the fact that the Alter Rebbe was liberated, it was clearly a vindication, not just here in this physical world, but in the spiritual worlds. There was a sort of spiritual sanctioning for the activities and the ambitions of the Alter Rebbe. The tradition is told that when the Alter Rebbe was in jail, he had visitors from the spiritual world, from the world of truth. The tradition is that the Baal Shem Tov and the Mezritcher Magid, Reb Dov Ber, visited him in jail. And the Alter Rebbe says, tell me if this whole story, what's going on over here, and perhaps this is a sign that I should not continue these activities. So if I ever am liberated, if I'm ever able to go free, should I continue? And they said, yes, you're right. This is all about, there's a lot of questioning, there's a lot of debating as to what you're doing right now. But the truth is, once you will be liberated, you should, since you already started, you should continue teaching, and you should increase, you should enhance and expand on the teachings that you have already taught. You should teach more Hasidus and disseminate and spread them further yet. So in this story, we see both this idea that there was a spiritual sort of accusation, or in fact, there was a spiritual decree against the teaching of Hasidus, and the process, this whole process of the arrest and the liberation brought about a deeper and more expanded level of Hasidus. And they also gave him a special assurance that you will go out. You will indeed be liberated, and you should teach more. And it is known that the Hasidic teachings and discourses of the Alter Rebbe subsequent to his liberation, his freedom from jail, became more elaborate, more expansive. The discourses are lengthier with more explanation. Teachings of Hasidus reached more communities, more people. So thus, Yutas Kislev is seen as not just a new phase in the teaching of Hasidus, but also it is considered the very essence of the Hasidic Yom Tov, which here it was agreed in the supernal worlds, Min HaShamayim, that Hasidic teachings should be available to the masses, and each person takes upon themselves to study, whether it's the Tanya or other writings of Hasidus. And it is through this we're able to continue teaching the Hasidus, as it is known, the Baal Shem Tov, when once he was visiting in the supernal realms, as he would often do, he came across Mashiach, and he asked him, Emasai Kasi Mar, when, my master, will you finally come and redeem the Jewish people? He said, L'chashayafutzu my nasecha chutza, when the mayanis, the well springs, the teachings of Hasidic and the mystical teachings of the Torah will be disseminated and will be spread out to the furthest reaches of the world, that is when Mashiach will come. So ultimately, through studying Hasidus and the Hasidic ideas and implementing them, that is how we accelerate and hasten the arrival of Mashiach. In any case, this is all an introduction to the question we asked before about Yaakov, because the Alter Rebbe, as soon as he was liberated, he wrote an interesting letter to his followers, to his Hasidim. And the letter was, on the one hand, there was some joy, there was some elation, jubilee from the fact that he was able to, after going such a difficult arrest and stay in jail. But it was a letter of caution to his Hasidim. And that is, there's a natural tendency after one becomes victorious, go through a lengthy battle, and the winners, the victors, could feel a sense of pride, superiority over their antagonists, over their opponents. The Alter Rebbe, and it was a very, very bitter struggle, lots of lashon hara, lots of misinformation. It was a very, very difficult period of time. But nevertheless, the Alter Rebbe wanted to caution his Hasidim that they should not feel smug and arrogant over the fact that they won. He wanted them to be gracious in their victory. He wanted them to be able to reach out to the opponents, not to demean, to denigrate, even mistreat these what were called as misnagdim, those who were the opponents, but rather to reach out in compassion and kindness. Don't rub it into their face. And ultimately and hopefully, through this process, the cooler heads will prevail. And he says, Kamayim apanim apanim, if we will project, as the Hasidim will project a sense of kindness and compassion towards them, perhaps, and ultimately there is the assurance, Kamayim apanim apanim, that it will reflect back to us. They will reflect back feelings of love and brotherhood. So he writes this letter, which is an extraordinary thing, because after going through that whole difficult thing, the Alter Rebbe makes a special mention that we should feel and not boast and be prideful and so on, but rather to be kind and considerate and sensitive to them. So this letter, it's written in the Igeres HaKodesh. It's the second letter, and he bases it on this week's parsha, which the parsha Vayishlach typically coincides with the Yom Tov of Yotes Kislev, the day of his liberation. And he brings this verse where Yaakov says, Katonti, that feel small, I feel diminished, mikala chasadim umikala emes. And here the Alter Rebbe seeks to give a clarity, some kind of perspective on what Yaakov was saying. And as we mentioned before, the question is, and many of the commentators struggle to pinpoint exactly what's going on, because on the one hand, Yaakov's saying is, I became small. I became diminished. Mikala chasadim, from all the kindness and all the favors and all the blessings and all the good things that happened to me. Which is hard to understand, because when something good happens to you, naturally you don't feel small. Naturally you don't feel humble and diminished. It should elicit something about a certain sense of self-enhancement, self-aggrandizement. What was Yaakov saying here? So the Alter Rebbe explains that what does it mean to receive grace, to receive kindness, to receive a favor from Hashem? He says that every blessing that Hashem gives us, every good thing that we have in our life is ultimately all about us coming closer to Hashem. When you receive a favor or something good from somebody, it could generally, we could have two responses. It could elicit two different reactions. Naturally, we may think, when someone does something good to you, you feel that you deserve it. You feel that you are worthy. And when that happens, it's a very, very complicated thing, because all of a sudden, when you are chosen over somebody else, you begin to say, you know why that kindness happened to me? Why I received that favor? It is because you start identifying, your ego comes out. The narcissistic aspect of you begins to say, I deserve it, and that person doesn't. So you begin to look down on other people. You begin to look at other people as inferior. That sense of superiority, that pride that you have, that you're so deserving, automatically makes you look down on others. It could also make you become very blind, oblivious to the flaws, to the deficiencies that you really have, because you think you really deserve it, even though you may not. And thus, you become totally wrapped up in your own ego, in your own bubble, so to speak. And therefore, it is very, very hard to connect with another person, to see the good, the positive in others, because you think, I am so worthy. And it happens sometimes, even people who go through difficulties in life, they strike out in a business venture, they're down and out, then all this, and they look at themselves and they loathe their situation, but then all of a sudden something good happens and something positive, and they say, oh, it was my genius, it was my creativity, my ingenuity, which brought about this goodwill, this positivity in life. And that, there's nothing good or healthy about that. It only leads to a certain breakdown in your relationship with others. That's one reaction, and oftentimes it's very, very natural for people to feel that the good things in their life is because they're worthy and they're deserving. But as we mentioned, it could lead to many negative and unhealthy consequences. Now, that is indeed one possible scenario. But now, let's think about it in the other way. Imagine something happens to you good in life and you start to think, maybe I didn't deserve this. Maybe this is something that I am worthy of. In fact, this is precisely what Yaakov went through in his life. Because as the Alter Rebbe explains, the more Hashem gives you, when Hashem is gracing you, He is giving you blessings, whether it's parnasa, whether it's health, other things, other ambitions or dreams you have in life, and you receive that, that means you're coming closer to Hashem. So the closer you come to Hashem, what happens? If Hashem is the essence of everything in this world, and this is something that is highlighted and underscored in the teachings of Chassidus and the Chabad Chassidus, how everything in this world is really Hashem. Ein od milvado. There is no reality. There is no existence that there's nothing outside of Hashem. Hashem is the core, is the essence of everything in this world. And therefore, the more we are cognizant of that, the more we come to appreciate that. So what happens is, the closer we come to Hashem, the more we realize that it's not about us. We don't truly have our independent existence. It only exists in the all-pervasive reality of Hashem. So then we start to realize how small we are. And therefore, the more we get, the more Hashem gives us, the smaller and smaller we become. That means we're coming closer to Hashem. And the closer we come to Hashem, the more diminished, the more small we may feel. Now that smallness, that humility is, on the one hand, we become small because we are right now becoming more cognizant, more aware of the presence of Hashem in our lives. So on the one hand, that makes us feel very, very small and diminished. But on the other hand, it actually makes us greater. It enhances us because now we are seeing how we are part of the one true reality in this world. So it may, superficially, we may feel small, but in essence, we are connected and we are one in this organic reality that is the real true reality. So the more we connect to our deepest self, the more we connect to Hashem, the greater we become. So if a person is not aware of Hashem's presence in their lives, so then they realize they have no true identity. So they resort to looking outside. They look at all of these extraneous things to give them a sense of purpose, a sense of identity. And therefore, what identity exists out of Hashem? There's our ego, which is superficial, artificial. There's nothing truly there. But if it's all about our ego, there's no place for that. In that selfish bubble, there is no place for anybody else. It is very, very hard to get along with anybody because everybody else is a contradiction, is interfering with our lives, with our ambitions, with our dreams and goals. So we look at everyone as a competition, and therefore we put them down to feel secure by ourselves. And that would invariably be the conclusion of someone who just won a victory over their enemy. Of course, they'll rub it in their face, they'll demean, denigrate them because they see themselves and their adversary, their opponent, as two separate entities, two competing entities, and thus there's a struggle. But if we see ourselves as part of the oneness of Hashem, so then we look at everybody else, everyone is part of that oneness. So now we look at somebody else, we see the presence of Hashem, we see the holiness of Hashem in each one. So it brings us to love them more, to appreciate them more. And that's what the Alter Rebbe is saying. This is the midah of Yaakov. When he said, Katonti mikol hachasad mikol ha'emes, despite all that he went through in life, and Hashem gave him riches, he gave him such a beautiful family, and all of that, it didn't make Yaakov smug, and he say, look at all you guys, look at you Lavan, look at you Esav, look what I got, look what you have. It actually made him feel less and less deserving. He said, why am I having it? Why did I get all of this? He started to feel Hashem's presence. He came closer and closer with every bracha, with every blessing in his life, coming closer to Hashem. It made him feel less and less worthy. But then, ironically, he was able to connect to all those other people in his life. And that's the Alter Rebbe is telling his Hasidim that we should latch on, we should imitate and replicate the midah of Yaakov in our lives. That all of those who were going after us all this time, we should be gracious, appreciate the blessings that we have. And thus, we should try to find the grace, the goodness in what were our opponents that we were struggling with. And if we project that kindness and that sensitivity, we won't be as judgmental. They, in turn, if we find the goodness in them, they will find the goodness in us. They tell the story of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev. Once a chassid of his came to him and he said, Rebbe, I have a problem. I have a business venture right now, and my partner, he's a nice guy and everything, but he doesn't love God. He is not involved in Judaism and religiosity and all of that. So the Rebbe said, "Oy, that's a big problem. But let me say, is he a good person? Is he a nice person? Yes, he's very, very nice, but he doesn't go to shul." So the Rebbe said, "Let me ask you, is he happy with the success of another Jew?" He said, "Rebbe, come to think of it, I was just recently awarded a contract to supply the local count, with some supplies, and he came over to congratulate me. But still, he's not really involved in Torah observance and mitzvot. How could I go into a business venture with him? So the Rebbe said, let me tell you a story. There was once a king who had an army and there was a neighboring country that there was a very bitter conflict, and it came time they needed to go to war. So he sent his general who took the army, and they were engaged in this battle, but they were defeated. So the king sent a second general who took the army and went back to war, and they were victorious. So all the king's advisors said, this tells us something. The first general took the army, and he was defeated. The second general took the same army, and they were victorious. How is that possible? There can only be one logical conclusion, that the first general was a traitor, and he was working for the other side, and he was undermining you, and now he needs to be punished. So the king didn't know what to do. He was in a very difficult situation, and he knew there was some old Jew at the edge of the forest who was very, very wise, and he reached out to him to get his input. He wanted to hear what should he do. So this old man, he comes to the king's court, and he hears what the advisor is saying, what the king is saying. He says, well, I have a test for you. What we need to do is throw a big parade, a victory parade, for this second general. And the whole town should come out to congratulate and to celebrate this wonderful victory. And I will tell you what to do. So the whole town comes out, and they are serenading this general with all the accolades and praises. And the old man told the king, I want you to go past this first general, let the procession go by his house. And I want you to very discreetly stand on the side. Observe, how does this general react? And you'll see, based on his reaction, if he is standing there and he is angry and upset, you will know he is not on your side. He is really a traitor. But if he is excited and if he is happy, then you know he is not a traitor. So they pass by the first general's house, and there he is. He's standing by the window, and he is clapping and excited, and he throws these flowers into the path of the generals passing by. And the old man says, you see, he actually is really on your side. He was never a traitor. It was bad luck. The other people had a good strategy. But you see, the fact that he is happy for the success of this general, of the second general, happy for the success of this country, means he has the good of the country in his heart, and that's what he truly is happy about. And the Rebbe Vayishlach Bar Ditchev said, the same too is with us fellow Jews. Every single one of us are an agent of Hashem here in this world to do kindness and to do mitzvahs. But many of us encounter a struggle with the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. Makes life very, very difficult. So therefore, many lose in this battle. But the question is, how do we really know if someone truly loves Hashem? And it is merely the difficulty, the struggles of life that bring them down? Or are they totally disinterested and they don't really love Hashem? So the answer is, you need to see how they treat the children of Hashem. If you truly love Hashem, you will love His children. You can't say, Hashem, I love you, but I despise your children. It's like someone telling a parent, you're amazing. I love you so much, but I can't stand your children. They're gross and disgusting. I can't get near them. Because the parent will say, if you really, really love me, you love what I love, which is my children. And therefore, the Rebbe Vayishlach said, you see this person, you have to teach them Torah and mitzvahs. Try your best to be makar of them, to bring them closer to Hashem, to Torah mitzvahs. However, if you see that he is happy for the goodness of it, the success of another person, if you see he's truly excited and happy for the success of another person, you know that he truly and innately does love Hashem. And this is what the Alter Rebbe is telling his Chassidim, that at the end of the day, we get into disputes, we have all these challenges in life. But at the end of the day, we have to find the oneness, the unity that pervades all of reality. And therefore, we look at another person, and on the outside, there's a competition. There appears to be a disagreement. But even when we are vindicated, we are proven right, we should realize that that which Hashem displayed to us in life should elicit within us a sense of humility, a sense of unworthiness. And when we do that, when we feel deserving, that will hinder any growth. We can never really mature and grow as a person because we are going to get in our own way. But if we come to appreciate that it is Hashem's hand that's guiding us in life, and then we look around at everybody else, we see how each person is not a hindrance, but actually could help us grow, help us mature, both on an emotional and spiritual level. This was one of the teachings of the Alter Rebbe, which, as we mentioned before, really it revolutionized the way we traditionally think about Torah and about mitzvahs, and how we interact with other people. So may it be Hashem's will that this upcoming Yitas Kislev, when we celebrate the day of the liberation of the Alter Rebbe, it should be a day that each and every one of us takes upon themselves to study Chassidus. Those who haven't studied before should at least, there's so much online you could read, Chabad.org and many other resources, whether it's the Tanya, other teachings. Those who already study should take upon themselves to study a little bit more. And as we mentioned, through the teachings, through studying Chassidus and disseminating the ideas of Chassidus, this indeed does hasten the arrival of Mashiach. May it be truly in our days when it comes a time when each and every one of us feels the presence of Hashem is in our life with the coming of Mashiach. B'mheira v'yameinu. Amen.